The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Well, good evening, everyone, or good morning, depending on the time zone you're in. I'm still seeing people arriving, but it's a couple of minutes after 7, so we'll get going. Just to kill just a minute or two here. I'm in Asheville, North Carolina, as many of you know, and we've had a mixed bag of weather this week. We had snow, and now it's trying to go back to spring again, so hopefully it's going to warm up a bit. If you haven't downloaded out, so the URL is on the screen there. If you write down BQQHBK8 and then put tinyurl.com in front of it, you should get your PDFs of those. So, having said that, I'm going to move forward to the next slide and get going. And I want to do the usual thing and review what we did last week. So, we talked last week about finding your purpose in life, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that tonight. We talked about chunking down your goals so that you're not trying to eat the elephant in one bite. I gave you some more ways of changing beliefs, and I'll mention another one of those tonight. I talked about silencing your inner critic, because sometimes it is your worst enemy, and a lot of times your inner critic is simply, we call them tapes that play in your head whenever you do something that your parents may have admonished you not to do back when you were a kid. So those tapes get programmed into us, and we get criticism from people that no longer are in our lives perhaps, but the tapes are still there. I also gave you 4 choices for dealing with bad situations, which I hope will be helpful to you, because it's always useful to know that you do at least have a choice, because sometimes you feel paralyzed by thinking that you don't have a choice. And then we also talked about the possible need to get rid of some of your toxic friends, because they can drag you down and really squelch some of your initiative to try to be successful, especially if they feel like you might wind up being more successful than they are. Bob Dylan used to have a song years ago, back in the 60s, that said that they want to drag you down into the same hole that they're in, and there's a great deal of truth to that. So tonight I'd like to get a little bit of feedback from you. So I've actually created some survey questions here, and I'd like to just kind of take stock of what you're doing right now and see if we can get a sense of how things are going here. So the first one here is, are you reviewing your goals at least twice daily? Because this is a major component of success, and I'll give you a few minutes here to respond to that. So I've got right now about 55% of you saying yes, 27% saying no, and 18% saying I haven't set any goals yet. So that says that some of you still have some work to do. And I see some people are still voting, so or answering the poll. So this is probably typical of early arrivals and trying to figure out exactly how to handle these things. So I'm going to go ahead and close the poll at this point for that one. And then I want to take a look at number 2 here. Are you practicing the principles that you've learned so far? And let's take a look at what you've got there. Okay. Looks like you're finished with that. Okay, so the results are 38% are doing most of them. That's great. 54% some of them. 8% of you are saying you haven't had time for success yet, and I understand exactly where you're coming from, although I will urge you to try to make the time. It's one of those things that you probably won't find the time anytime soon, because I know how busy some of you are. Okay, the next one. Let's see how this is working. Are you getting any kind of positive results yet? So let's see how that's going. Okay, I really appreciate your candid responses, because it's interesting to me to see how this is working. About 36% of you say yes, you are getting some positive results, which is fantastic, especially this early in the game. We still have about 8 more sessions after this one, so which is one of the good things about doing this in a weekly segment, because if we did a two-day seminar, you wouldn't have any chance to practice anything in between sessions, and this way it's spread out over time, so you get a chance to actually apply things as you go. At this point, the number says 40% yes, 7% no, and 53% not sure. So those are good responses. Thank you. Okay, I have a couple more here. I'm in the polling mode here. So this question is, are you using the website, the success website, howcanibesuccessful.ning.com? So let's see how that's working, because I'm hoping that this is a good resource for you. At the moment, we only have about 18 of you signed on, so we don't have a large sample, but it's good enough to get a feeling for how this is working. And it looks like everybody's finished the polling. So 57% say yes, 43% say no. For those of you that are not using a website, I would assume that for some of you it's simply because you haven't had time to do it. But if you have looked at the website and you aren't finding what you're looking for there, please send me an email and tell me what we can do that might make it more useful for you. I'm trying to load it up with videos and other supplemental things so that it will be useful. And I have one last question here, because last week we talked about finding your purpose in life, and so the question is, I know my purpose in life, yes, no, not sure, etc. Okay, so we have 21% saying yes, 64% saying uncertain, and 14% saying definitely no. And so we need to do a little more work on this one for you. Okay. So thank you very much for all those responses. Okay. All right, so one of the things that it's going to sound preachy when I say it, but just to drive the point home, I believe I started off telling you at the very first session that this is one of those things where I'm going to present principles, but just knowing the principles consciously won't help you at all. You have to actually get out there and apply them. and it's very much similar to losing weight. You can't have somebody else go out and do the exercise for you. Actually, you can, but it won't help your weight any. So tonight, we're going to talk about mastermind groups. We're going to talk about something that I'm sure all of you have heard about called the law of attraction. And if you saw the video, The Secret, which came out about maybe 7-8 years ago, you know that the law of attraction has had a lot of interest and skeptics and the whole ball of wax, and I'm going to talk a little bit about it. We're going to also talk about capturing ideas as they come to you, expressing gratitude for those ideas, creating new habits, and what each of us can do to make a positive difference. And I want to reference some books and so on, and invite your friends to join the website. So, and I'll just make a plug for that one. Please do invite your friends that might be interested in success principles to join the website, because all the sessions are being recorded and they can watch those at their leisure and start practicing themselves. So do take advantage of that. Okay, so let's come back to the whole thing about purpose. How do you know what is your purpose in life? Well, I gave you an exercise last week that I will tell you is best done with a group of people, generally a group of 3, you and 2 other people, where they can help you analyze the patterns that exist in the samples that you give them. So when they ask you to tell about a job that you were turned on to, and a hobby or a sport that you like to get into, activity that you like to engage in, and they ask you to tell about some fantasy or wish list thing, it's very useful to have someone else look for the thread that runs through those things, because it can be very difficult to do it yourself. Now, there's another way, though, and I think you'll be able to relate to this. One of those is to look for things that you do in your life where time seems to stand still. That is, time goes by like you're not aware of it. You're so engaged, so involved in whatever you're doing that you lose a sense of time. And it's the opposite of the things that you do that are so unpleasant that a few minutes seems to drag on forever. And those I'm sure some of you have had. And I'm getting a comment from someone that the audio is cutting off. If anybody else is having the trouble, you can send me a note on the question pad or let me know. But if you're using an iPad, there's a possibility that it's not synced with this particular program, and I don't know whether you can vote with an iPad or not. I'll have to check it out later. So hang in there with us. If you have access to another computer, great. If you don't, you can watch the recording in the next day or so. Okay, I'm getting a couple comments from people saying the audio is okay. So and I have another computer sitting beside me here that's monitoring the broadcast, and it seems to be okay. So audio is coming in and out. I'm on a Windows 7 laptop. Okay. I don't know what to do about it, I'll be honest with you. So we'll just have to bear with it. And if you have trouble tonight, then maybe you'll have to watch the recording tomorrow or next day. Okay. This is one of those things that I can't be the broadcaster and the technician both. So I just have to rely on the technology to work. Number of people saying everything's okay here, so it could be the bandwidth on your own cable provider. I know that I have a friend in Iowa City who I talk to a lot, and every once in a while the bandwidth on his system seems to get very narrow, and he has trouble hearing me. So number of people are saying I'm on a high-speed line and everything is working fine, and other people saying that it's not so bad that I can't hear what you're saying. So that's good. Okay, so first thing to look at is passion. where you're doing something that you love. Time seems to stand still when you're engaged in it. You totally lose track of time. If you do become aware of things, I've said before, sometimes you have worked on something for a long time and you suddenly realize that you really need to eat or take a break or go to the bathroom or whatever, and you kind of resent the intrusions from your body because you would really like to continue working on whatever it is. Abraham Maslow called that self-actualization. You're doing something that you are totally fulfilled by doing, and that's the best of all possible worlds when that happens. Now, the other component to finding your purpose is what kind of talent do you have? And the way to understand what I'm saying about this is when you really have talent for something, it seems easy. And when you do it, other people who are observing you watch you and they say, man, you make it seem so easy. I mean, it's like watching some of the sports players, you know, Michael Jordan or somebody, do what they do, and it looks like it's just trivial to them. I have a favorite group called the Kruger Brothers who live in I can't even think where they live right now. But anyway, one of them plays a banjo, and he plays it so fast that he's been timed at several hundred clicks per minute, and it's just incredible to watch him, and it looks effortless when he does it. Yes, thank you, Wilkesboro. And he's just an amazing banjo player. In fact, the whole group, it's a trio, and all three of these guys are just fantastic musicians, and when they play, they make it look really easy. And I'm a guitar player, so I have some point of reference for this whole thing that they are really, really skilled at what they do. Now, when passion and talent converge, what you find is this is the thing that fulfills you. And when you're living your purpose, you are being fulfilled. Okay? So that's it. And I got very lucky back in the 80s. Actually, back in the 60s was my first taste of what I'm doing now, because in my last couple of years of college, I taught guitar and found that I loved doing it. Not only did I like playing, but I also enjoyed teaching, and found that I seemed to have a knack for it. And then when I finally decided to go into the seminar business, I found that what I was doing was really neat. And there are times when I'm in front of an audience and I think I'm getting paid to do this, and this is just really, really unreal when you think about it, and it's so much fun to be doing. So I wrote a blog today called, I do have a blog called How Can I Be Successful.blogspot.com, and one of the comments I made was that when you are fulfilling your purpose, it's not work, it's play. And most of us structure our lives so that we have 5 days of work and 2 days of play. And sometimes, for a lot of you, you don't even get the 2 days of play because you have such a busy schedule in your life. However, from 32 years now, most of the time, my weeks are 7 days of play. So I've got 5 days in which I'm doing what I love to do as a work routine, and then 2 days to do whatever I want to just for strictly personal enjoyment, and it's all play. There is a video by Sir Ken Robinson that I posted on our website. It's under the Success Principles tab, and he talks about people finding what they're supposed to do in life. He has a book called Elements that I have read some of, and in that book he talks about people like Jillian Lynn, who when she was about 9 years old the school sent a note home to her mom saying she's got a learning disorder, and mom took her to a specialist who checked out and said she doesn't have anything wrong with her, she's a dancer, take her to dance school. And mother did that, and Jillian became a world-class ballerina, choreographed Phantom of the Opera and Cats, and has made millions of dollars providing pleasure to a lot of people around the world. So she found her calling accidentally. Incidentally, as Ken Robinson says on one of his videos on TED.com, she would probably be diagnosed as being ADHD today and put on Ritalin so that she would calm down, be quiet, be submissive, and shut the hell up. And I'm very passionate about the need for us to get kids off Ritalin who are simply creative, who are simply kinesthetic learners, etc. So we'll talk more about that some other time. But certainly they're not going to be allowed to fulfill their purpose in life if the school system has any way of controlling them and keeping them from finding their niche in life. So I put this slide in here to illustrate some of what happens to us, because a lot of us feel like this guy. I've had a few years of my life when I worked in industry that went like that, where I felt like all hell was breaking loose on me sometimes, and I certainly was not feeling fulfilled. One of the things that I'm very keen on and would urge you to think about is that many of us are living scripts. It's a litany of musts, shoulds, you got to do it. These ideas are laid on us by society. You got to go to college. Who says you got to go to college? In fact, it turns out that 4 of the wealthiest people in the world didn't go to college. So if you are looking to make a lot of money, college is not necessarily the ticket to do that. In fact, as again Ken Robinson says in one of his programs, degrees are becoming worthless because we have so many people that have MBAs now. We have so many people that have PhDs. We have so many people that have bachelor's degrees in subjects for which there's no job market. And so degrees don't guarantee you anything. And and yet we're told you got to do this and you can't do that. You can't go into art. You can't go into music. You can't make a living at that sort of thing. And so we have all these prohibitions and scripts laid on us. And so instead of living our own lives, we're actually living somebody else's script that's been placed on us. In the video that's on the website, Ken Robinson tells about a woman who was an absolutely fantastic pianist, and she gave a performance one night that was just spectacular. And after the performance, her conductor sat down with her and he said, you played really well tonight. And she said, thank you. And he said, but you didn't enjoy it, did you? And she said, what do you mean? He says, you don't really like being a pianist, do you? And she said, well, if you get right down to it, no, I'm just good at it. And he said, well, it shows. He said, you know, what do you really like to do? And what would you like to be doing? And she said, well, I'd really like to be a writer. But she had invested so much of her life in becoming a classical pianist that she couldn't see doing anything else. But she took him at his word, and she decided to quit playing piano and be a writer, and became a very successful and very happy person in the process. Now, I talked last week about my friend Doug DiCarlo, who's online with us tonight, and Doug lives up on the mountain behind me, and we've known each other for quite a few years. And I'm sure he won't mind if I tell you this, because he's told it to tons of people himself. But Doug told me once that he spent years trying to get good at something that he didn't like doing, thinking that if he got good at it, he would actually like it. It don't work. It just doesn't work that way. So you got to have 2 things. You got to like what you do, and you have to have the talent for doing it. And if you simply don't have the skill, you can generally develop skill, but if you don't have the aptitude, then you might need to re-examine what it is that you would like to do. However, Michael Michalko tells about an artist who practiced being an artist for so long that he eventually made it. And so he might not have had the skill at the beginning, but he developed it over time. Another Ken Robinson example, he tells about a fellow who wanted to be a fireman. That's it. He never wanted to do anything else. But somewhere along the line in his grade school days, he told one of his teachers that he wanted to be a fireman. And this teacher just berated him, told him he would never amount to anything. It was a stupid idea. He had to have a better aspiration than that. And fortunately for this fellow, he ignored what the teacher said and might have been hurt a little bit by it, but he ignored it, went on and became a fireman. And I love these kinds of turnarounds because he eventually got the last laugh on this teacher, because the teacher was involved in a car accident one day, and this fellow happened to be in the fire truck that responded to the accident, pulled the guy out of the car and saved his life, because I believe what happened was the car caught on fire, and also pulled his wife out of the car. So I would guess that that teacher is happy that the fellow ignored his berating him about being a fireman. I heard another story recently about a kid in first or second grade who was in a class one day drawing a horse, and another kid said, "What are you doing?" And he said, "I'm drawing a horse." And this other kid said, "That's the dumbest thing I've ever seen. It's terrible. You can't draw." And I expect the kid put his crayons up and probably never tried to draw again. It's that easy for us to be damaged by the criticism of other people. And Abraham Maslow said that you can't be self-actualizing until you become immune to the good opinions of other people. That is, you're not concerned about what other people think about you. And I don't know how many of you know Wayne Dyer and like Wayne Dyer. I happen to love what the guy does. He's a psychologist who has written a ton of books and done all kinds of audio recordings and so on. And I really like Wayne because he's one of the few common sense psychologists that I know of. And Wayne talks about the fact that reputation is strictly the opinions of other people about you. And so if you sample a group of 30 people or 50 people or 100 people, you'll find that there's 2 that love you, there's 2 that absolutely hate you, and there's all kinds of people in between. Now, you can't be both good and bad, except in the perceptions of the people who are observing you. So he said for many years he had learned to ignore the opinions of other people and just do his own thing. Somebody's going to like you, somebody's not going to like you, and that's just the way it goes. You can't please everybody. That's just an absolute truth. As a matter of fact, Wayne Dyer asked a question that I would like to have you think about, because this is also aimed at helping you think about your purpose. If there were no money, what would you be doing? In other words, many of us are working to make a living. We say we have to work because we have bills to pay. We got to be able to buy food and clothing and housing and all that sort of thing. But if you didn't need money, maybe you're independently wealthy, maybe you won the lottery, what would you be doing? Would you still continue doing the same job you do? You know, I teach project management. That's been the core courses, or the core thing that I've done for the past 30-some years. And one of the things that I ask people, and some of you have been in my classes and you know this, I ask, how many of you are passionate about managing projects? The sad thing is, in a class of 30 people, you might get 5 hands that go up, because when I ask this next question, this is what turns people on. I say, how many of you are passionate about the work that's being done in your projects? It turns out that this is what people really love in many cases. They don't love managing projects. They want to be project managers because that's where they get more money and they get more status. And in our society, we define success as status and money. Shouldn't it be doing something that you love, something that fulfills you, something that is your basic nature? And if you don't think that that's true right now, or if that's not true for you, this is where I would urge you to really assess where you are and where you're going, and ask yourself if this is what you want to be doing 20 years from now. Or another example is, if you were at the end of your life looking back, what would you say? What would you want to say about your life? You know, there's an old song that says, "I did it my way." Wouldn't it be nice to be able to say that, instead of saying, "Well, I sure did spend way too much time doing something I hated, hoping that I'd get good at it and like it"? That would be a sad state of affairs for us. So take that assessment now. Okay. here's another question that Wayne Dyer asked, and it's made me think a lot. Suppose you learned that you had only 6 months to live. How would you live it? You know, there's the thing about live every day is your last day to live. That has some problems because if I had only 1 day left to live, I would want to spend it with people I love. I sure wouldn't want to spend it going to work. But I couldn't do that every single day because, like most of you, I do need to make money to live. And fortunately, I do it in a way that I love doing. But if you think about a 6-month time frame instead of a day at a time, there are definitely some things that I would want to do over that 6-month time that I might not do if I weren't thinking of it that way. And so this is another perspective to get you focused on what do you really love about living? How do you want to live your life? How do you want to spend your time? Because if you don't take control of your life, you will drift through life being blown back and forth by whatever happens to take place in your life. And so it's much better if you actually think ahead and plan your life and do what you really are rewarded for doing. Okay, now we're going to shift gears to this one. We talked last week about toxic friends, and I told you about some of that. I found this. I have an art service that I like called Shutterstock, and I get stock art from them and have permission to use it on these slides and so on. And I just thought this captured the essence of a kind of a toxic community. And I'm going to show you a video in just a moment that talks about this. If you look at a group like this, you can just sort of bet that these folks have negative attitudes, that they feel put down by life. They feel like they're victims of all the crap that goes on in the world. They don't have very positive outlooks, and they're not very likely to be successful. And if they're part of your peer group and your community, as we call it, they're likely to drag you down. Now, an example of this is about 5 years into my new career as a seminar instructor, I was at a funeral of a relative in my family, and one of my cousins, who was about 6 months younger than me, she and I had not been real close, but we did seem to have an affinity for each other, and she was talking to me at the funeral and asking me what was I doing, and I was telling her. And I don't usually tell people these kinds of things, but she asked something about income, and I said, I know what it was. She asked me why I had left a high-paying job at ITT and gone into something like this, and I said, well, actually I'm making way more than I was making there. And I told her my daily rate for teaching and so on, and she says, oh, you're aiming too high, which I thought was a crazy statement because I was already getting paid that kind of money. What she meant was she couldn't conceive of me making the kind of money that I was making at that time. And had I stayed at ITT, I certainly never would have done so. So you have to disregard the opinions of people who can't believe that what you're doing is the right thing to do and so on. Okay, so I'm going to try something tonight. The technology may or may not work correctly, but I think it will because I tested it earlier today, and I believe it'll work okay. I just discovered a fellow named Peter Diamandis, and I found a little 2-minute video on YouTube that I'd like to play for you, and we'll see how this works, and I'm going to let it speak for itself.
Hey, it's Peter Diamandis with your Abundance Espresso Shot. Today I want to talk to you about the importance of your community. You know, literally, life is who you go through life with. It's a really important subject. Maybe it's obvious, maybe it's not. But if you go through life with people that you love hanging with, that are amazing in their own ways, that hold you to high standards, then you're going to be your best. If you're going through life with people who are, down in the dumps, depressed, think the world is going to hell in the handbasket, then that's how you're going to feel. Literally, the community you have around you affects the way you see the world. So, when I'm at Singularity, for example, and people are thinking about how to solve the world challenge, think upon that's how I feel. I speak to people about big, bold, crazy ideas and have them not only understand, but add to that. So if you want to lose weight, hang around people who are thin. If you want to be muscular and be in great health, hang around people who are in great health. I mean, it's that easy. Your community shapes your life. So stop thinking about who are you spending time with. Are they people you look up to that you want to be like, or people who are really taking out that one change, transform life in such a fashion? Who you want to find people, build a community, or join a life and help shape the way you're going to be, because you can do anything in life. Build that community, join that community, be that community.
Okay. Let's see if we're back here. Okay. I know that that audio got broken up. The video won't track with it, even though I have a very high-speed connection here through Charter Communications. So if you had trouble hearing it or whatever, go to the How Can I Be Successful website, because it is on the website and you can play it there. That's where I was playing it from. And it's also on YouTube, but it is on the How to Be Successful website. As Peter says, what you need to do is you need to hang with people who share your same beliefs and values. That doesn't mean that you got to get rid of every single person in your life who doesn't think like you do, nor does it mean that your friends should all think like you do. But if you have people that are dragging you down, then you need to seriously question whether or not being friends with those folks is in your best interest. Peter Diamandis is a very interesting fellow. I bought one of his audio recordings from Nightingale Conant, and it was a good program called How to Get Abundance, and he has a book with that title, Abundance, on Amazon. And I haven't read the book, but I did listen to the CDs, and he has some principles that I thought were pretty cool, so I thought I'd share some of these with you. If nothing else, you may not totally agree with them, but they'll jar you to think a little bit. And one of the things that we have to learn to do is get out of our comfort zone occasionally if we're going to be successful. And so this first one I really love. He says, when given a choice, take both of them. Don't limit yourself by saying, well, I can only do one. Try to take them both. And he also has one, the second one says, okay, play by the book, but you be the author of the book. I really like that too, because what he's essentially saying here is you got to be in control of your life, and you got to make your own choices, and don't let other people dictate to you what you can do and what you can't do and so on. Third bullet, if you can't win, change the rules. There actually was a Star Trek episode in the very first series of Star Trek with Captain Kirk and Spock and all those, where he was, Captain Kirk was being tested by the Academy, and he sneaked in at night and changed the programming on the simulation, because the simulation was set up so that no student could win. It was set up so that they were going to fail every single time, and he didn't like a rigged game, as he put it, and so he reprogrammed the simulation so that he could win. Diamandis says the best way to predict the future is to create it. And actually, we do that, and we just don't realize that we create the future. We create it by the choices we make, by the actions we take. And then we think that things are happening to us sometimes. Well, actually, our lives are the result of the choices we've made. And again, this helps get us out of the victim mentality to realize that we have choices and that we can choose things that will get better outcomes than things that we might otherwise do. This next one can be a little bit tricky unless you know mathematics. The ratio of something to nothing is infinite. That is, if you divide any number by 0, you get infinity. And so his idea here is that if you can get results without making huge investments, you get big paybacks. So make that denominator as small as possible, make that numerator as large as possible, and you're going to get huge paybacks. The next bullet says you get what you reward. So one of the things that Diamandis did was he put up a prize of $10 million to someone who could build a vehicle that would take 3 people into a 40,000 kilometer orbit, I believe was his target. And he didn't have the $10 million. He had sponsors who put up the money. And when a company finally did it, Richard Branson licensed the technology because he started Virgin Galactic at that point in time, and his mission is to take people into space. And so they've been doing this now for several years. So Diamandis is a very interesting fellow. He's been dreaming about space travel and that sort of thing since he was a kid. And so he's living his dreams today. Next comment he says is, today's breakthrough was yesterday's crazy idea. And one of the problems that we have as individuals trying to be successful, especially if we're trying to be innovative, and I truly, truly believe that innovation must be a component of success, people will talk you out of any idea that they think is crazy. A good example of this is that the Swiss actually invented the digital watch. And they weren't very impressed with it because it didn't have any springs and gears. It didn't conform to what a usual watch is like. And they didn't even bother to patent it. It was just a toy as far as they were concerned. But they did take it to the annual watch convention or congress that year, put it on display. And Texas Instruments and Seiko came by and saw it. And they said, well, they didn't patent it. That means that we're free to make it. And over the next several years, digital watches took off. People really loved them. And the Swiss lost tens of thousands of watchmakers as a consequence of that. This is called a paradigm shift. Anytime you come up with something that defies conventional paradigms, people tend to say it's a crazy idea, it will never work, etc. When I was in college, I got an idea for, and I'm really dating myself when I tell you this, I got an idea for replacing the filament in a vacuum tube, which some of you only studied in the history of electronics. And I got an idea for replacing the cathode with a semiconductor. And I was talking to my chemistry professor, who was a physical chemist, and shared my idea with him. He said, well, lad, I don't think that'll work. And I said, okay, thank you very much. And about 2 months later, I was reading an IEEE journal, that's the Institute for Electrical and Electronic Engineers, and found that RCA had just patented exactly that kind of a device. And I showed it to Dr. Coots, and he got a big kick out of me. He said, well, lad, I guess I just talked you out of $1 million idea. And of course he hadn't, because RCA obviously had been working on this for quite some time. But anytime you propose something that is a paradigm breaker, the people that hold on to the old paradigms will tell you it's crazy. You know, when Einstein came out with the theory of relativity, one of the things that he got poo-pooed for was the fact that he had no credibility. He was a patent examiner, for God's sake. He wasn't even a professor at a recognized university. And so, of course, the great minds in science and physics in particular said he was crazy as heck. And, of course, they lived to see him proven to be correct as it is. So don't let people talk you out of your great ideas. Persist with them. The next one, the world's biggest problems are the greatest opportunities. As a matter of fact, I really like this idea. If you look at poverty, if you look at crime, if you look at the drug situation, et cetera, these are big problems, and they represent opportunities for somebody to come along with solutions. As a matter of fact, if you aren't familiar with IDEO, IDEO.org, I would urge you to go and take a look at their website. IDEO has been developing creative solutions to problems for many years, and they now have an open forum where they are posing world problems and asking for, there's 42,000 people that have joined Open IDEO since they started it, and it's growing every day. And they're asking people to offer solutions, and they're offering prizes and that sort of thing for all those solutions, because collectively we can come up with ideas to solve some of these problems. Now, we talked a little bit last week about the negative impact of television, and Diamandis shares that same notion. If you pay attention to what is on television, you know that there's very little positive news on TV. Even the Weather Channel, for goodness sakes, they say it's gonna snow a little bit here in Asheville, and it's doomsday, for God's sake. Armageddon's set in, and next thing you know, the grocery stores don't have any bread, milk, or eggs because people make a big run on them. They're petrified that they're going to get snowed in with 9 feet of snow, get buried, wind up having to have St. Bernard dogs come in with whiskey and all that sort. Of course, some of the guys up here in the mountains are hoping for that, I'm sure. But nevertheless, you get all this negative news. Here's the other thing. I wrote 60 Minutes a letter a long time ago, and they ignored me. But I said, how can you have a war on drugs when your own news broadcast is funded by the drug companies? The message you get if you watch the commercials is that you can solve every single problem with a pill. If your back hurts, there's a pill for that. If you are hyperactive, there's a pill for that. If you have ADHD, we have Ritalin. We can drug you the hell out of into submission, you know, so that you'll behave and sit down and don't make noise and so on. So the message you get is that every problem can be solved by a drug. Well, those are good drugs, but think about a kid who's 9 or 10 years old. How does a kid know the difference between a good drug and a bad drug? In fact, there's no such thing as a good drug and a bad drug if you get right down to it. We judge the good or bad by the outcome it produces. And there are some medical uses for even marijuana. So under those conditions, it's a good drug, but under the recreational condition, everybody says it's bad. So it's ridiculous. And so the best thing to do, as Diamanda says, is turn it off. And especially, you don't want to watch it late at night, because the last thing that should be in your head before you go to sleep is something positive. If you go to sleep with all this really bad stuff that you've just been watching, you're programming your subconscious to produce bad stuff in your life. Now, you may not believe that, but it's true, and you can prove it to yourself if you pay attention to the days when you've watched bad stuff at night and the days when you haven't, and you'll find that it definitely happens. Okay? So take a look at some of Diamandis' stuff if you're interested. And again now, the whole clue, the whole key to success is to build a success consciousness. And you won't do it the way that this photograph shows. The guy sitting in front of a TV with his clicker and a great big mug of beer. Nothing wrong with sitting there with some beer. Of course, he's got several of them that he's already finished, it looks like, on the table beside him. But being a total couch potato is not going to get you very far. So a few suggestions here for working on building your consciousness. As Diamandis said in his video, surround yourself with people who are positive thinkers, who are success-oriented, who have a positive outlook on life. And I really, really would encourage you to listen to some of the positive kinds of programs that Nightingale Conant has. They have all kinds of speakers who do audio stuff. You can listen to them on your MP3 player when you're jogging or walking or in your car. And I find that they help me to keep my outlook more positive than if I go for a long period of time without seeing them. Another thing that I would suggest you do is give up an hour of television each day and replace it with reading some really good books. Not just novels and things like that, but books on whatever interests you. Even if it's a subject like history or travel or something of that nature, but read something positive. And if you do that, you know, you got like 365 hours a year. You can read a lot of books in that period of time. Again, give up an hour of television and don't watch it just before bedtime. And if nothing else, this sounds a little silly, but I'm picking at you a little bit, but place a big mirror in front of the TV, and that way you can see if you look like this guy does. And the last bullet point here, I don't know how many of you have seen Michael Gerber's book, The E-Myth, but Michael Gerber talks about entrepreneurs and the fact that there are two ways that an entrepreneur can spend his or her time. One of those is doing the work in the business or of the business, such as in my case, I teach seminars and do training. And the other thing to do is to work on the business, which means you're marketing, you're trying to improve the business, you're selling, trying to grow it, trying to improve it, and so on. And so he said the trap you fall into is to spend all your time working in the business instead of working at least part of your time on the business. general rule of thumb is that you should spend about 20% of your week working on the business, which is 1 day a week out of a 5-day week. So you should be spending about a day a week trying to improve your business instead of just working in the business. Now, I got to thinking about that, and Jack Canfield, who I'll talk to you a little bit more about in a moment, made the point that we need to spend more time working on our lives instead of just being caught up in living our lives. Work on your life. Plan your life. Take control of your life. Ask yourself what kind of things you can do to advance yourself. That's what this program is all about. And I would be delighted to see all of you at the end of this program start writing me emails and letters saying, man, this stuff works. This crazy stuff works. And man, I am so much happier than I was when I started. Or even 5 years from now, I'd love to hear some of those stories. So I hope you will keep in touch. All right, one of the techniques that I mentioned last week, it can be very difficult to be successful all by yourself. And it can be difficult to make changes in yourself by yourself. All the programs like AA, where they try to help people break destructive habits of alcohol or substance abuse, have found that it really makes a difference if you have a support group. And so when Napoleon Hill, who you have heard about, and if you haven't read his book, Think and Grow Rich, I would suggest you get a copy of that. It's very inexpensive today. Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. He did 25 years of research on success and what made people successful. And what he found was that most of the successful people in this world have had mastermind groups. These consist of 5 to 7 members. Sometimes you see them go up as high as 12, but it's a good idea generally to keep them somewhere in the range of 5 to 7. If it's below 5, you don't have enough capacity for creative thinking, and if it goes above 7, it's hard for everybody to get equal participation. And these mastermind groups meet regularly to help each other, and it can be weekly, bi-weekly, monthly, but generally speaking, weekly to bi-weekly is about right. And if they meet by telephone or on the internet, Jack Canfield has a group that every 3 months they spend 2 days face-to-face. And if you can afford to do that, that's a really useful way to go about it. When in the early days of these groups, each member takes a turn as the focus of help. That is, they spend one entire session of 1 to 2 hours focusing on that person and trying to give them suggestions and help and so on. After all of them have had a turn in the circle, they then start kind of sharing equally in each session. But and of course, occasionally an emergency comes up for a member, and they get all the attention in that meeting. So these things can be virtual or in person. I've told you about bridge lines. You can use GoToMeeting. You can use NetMeeting and live meeting and things of that nature to meet. And there's no pay involved. These are totally voluntary. But one of the things that you would like to do when you put together a mastermind group is you would like to have at least a few members on there who are actually a little bit ahead of you in terms of the kind of results that they've gotten. You say, well, why would they be willing to share all that with me? It turns out that most people who have made it love to share their ideas and their approaches with other people. So don't hesitate to ask people that are ahead of you in terms of earnings and success and so on. And by the way, diversity is an asset. Finding, for example, if you had a mastermind group that had an accountant on it and a person that was a salesperson and an artist and just pick different people, life scientists and so on, because they're going to bring different opinions and different viewpoints to the table that can be extremely useful to you. Okay, I'm seeing that I'm running low on time here, so I'm going to have to move through some of these. Okay, law of attraction. Law of attraction says that you get what you constantly think about. It's very much like the self-fulfilling prophecy. However, it's misnamed because the law of attraction is saying that you are attracting all this stuff to you from out in the world. Now, I'm going to tell you this is going to be a subtlety, and some of you may think, oh man, this is stretching, but it should be called the law of manifestation because everything in the universe is already within your consciousness. If you think about it, when you look out at the stars in the sky, those things are in your consciousness, in your awareness. They're not outside of you. It just appears that they are because we have a physical sense of the universe. We'll talk a little more about this later on because this is really important, and the quantum physicists are supporting everything I'm saying. This is not a religious notion or anything like this. This is the actual reality of this universe. So constantly trying to attract things actually gives you a sense that they're separate from you, and the subconscious responds by saying, oh, they're out there somewhere, so they'll have to stay out there. So you're constantly trying to attract things, keeps it away from you. It's like someone said one time, if you're concerned about being happy and you're always focused on how can I be happy, how can I be happy, how can I be happy, you're constantly aware of the fact that you aren't happy and you stay that way. So call it the law of manifestation and realize that it's already within you, and what you really have to do, as poet Robert Browning said, is open out a way for it to flow out. And that happens by allowing ideas to flow out of your consciousness. Carry a capture device at all times, a recorder so that you can do voice recordings. If you have a cell phone, you can have an MP3 app on it that you can use to record things. I carry 3x5 cards in my shirt pocket, so if I am able to write things down, I can, but if I'm driving, I use a recorder. When you do this, you let your subconscious know that you value those ideas, and so you don't lose them. Once in a while, you sit down and review them, prioritize them, and act on them. And this last suggestion may sound like some woo-woo things, but thank your subconscious for the ideas you get, because people who have practiced this find that the more they practice this way of doing it, the more ideas they get. All right, couple last thoughts I'd like to leave you with tonight. What can each of us do to make a positive difference in the world? Mark Victor Hansen, who is the co-writer of the Chicken Soup series of books, wants to plant 1 billion trees worldwide, global. He wants to do that. We hosted exchange students for 5 years in a row, and it was a great experience, and I'd like to think that it contributed to the lives of those girls. I'm still in touch with one of them who is in India right now. She's turning 40 this year, and I hear from some of the others occasionally. So it was a great experience, and I would recommend those kinds of things. There's an outfit called Kiva, K-I-V-A, that provides micro loans to people in foreign countries who are trying to start businesses. You can look them up on the internet, contribute to them. Support charities of some kind, including things like the SPCA. I really love the comment Gandhi made years ago where he said, you can tell a lot about people by the way they treat animals. And if you think about that in the United States, we're not doing very well. All right, for those of you that might be interested in starting businesses and you need funding, here are some sites to go to: Kickstarter, Indiegogo, Rocket Hub, WeFunder, and Crowdfunder. So if you have an idea for a business and you're trying to raise some money, these are sites you can go to, and I'll come back and talk a little bit more about these next week since I'm running out of time here. And the last thing I need to do is give you a couple of references and an assignment. So here are some references. Jack Canfield wrote a book called The Success Principles. It is an absolutely wonderful book. In it, he talks about the mastermind groups and gives very good advice on how to do those. I'm a real fan of Success Magazine. Every issue comes with a CD that has some recorded talks in it. I love those. Go to nightingale.com and find their free mission statement builder and create your mission statement. Hopefully this will help some of you get more focused on your purpose. And then the assignment, I have put an entire series of Jack Canfield's videos on the site where he is talking about the success principles. And those are all on the site. They're YouTube videos, but when you go to YouTube, you have to find them. So there's about 9 of them. The first one's a half an hour long. The rest of them are like 8 or 10 minutes each. And that makes it easy to watch the small chunks of them. And last thing I want to say is hopefully, again, each of these sessions will plant some seeds that will take root, but you got to nourish them, and I hope you have a good crop. And that's it for tonight, and I'll see you same time, same place next week, and I will have the recording up on the website hopefully by about noon tomorrow. Thank you very much, folks. Good evening. Send me questions by email if you need to, lewisinstituteinc.com, and sweet dreams if you're going to bed, and for those of you just starting your day, have a great day. Take care.